you're looking to dive into topics on how to live a happier, healthier, more fit, and long lifespan, then you've come to the right podcast. Livin the Dream with me, Coach Damian Evans. Together, we will explore the topics on all things health, fitness, and wellness. Together, we will be lifelong learners on this journey to living the ultimate dream. What up, Dream Team? Coach D here coming at you from beautiful sunny San Diego, and welcome back to the Livin the Dream Podcast. And in today's episode, we're going to continue on with our review of the great book, Good Energy, by authors Dr. Calley Means and her brother, Calley Means. All right, so we're going to continue on our journey through good energy, and in this next chapter, Dr. Calley shares a deep personal story that emphasizes the importance of trusting yourself over blindly following medical advice. It's called Trust Yourself, Not Your Doctor. The most pivotal 13 days of Dr. Calley's life came from ignoring a team of doctors. After her mom's pancreatic cancer diagnosis, a medical team from the prestigious institutions recommended a slew of invasive procedures. Things like biopsies, blood transfusions, and a liver stent. Typically, patients agree to these procedures without much question, especially when such recommendations come from top-tier medical establishments like Stanford, where she was at. But Dr. Calley, with her medical background, began asking questions. She learned that these procedures had only a 33% chance of slightly extending her mom's life, a 33% chance of shortening it, and a 33% chance of not impacting her health or lifespan at all. 1/3 of a chance of extending her mom's life just a little bit. Everything else, either negative or nothing. The invasive route would mean that her mom would spend her remaining days alone in a hospital due to COVID-19 protocols, potentially facing complications and needing frequent blood transfusions. Despite her mom's clarity about wanting to avoid unnecessary pain and nausea, the medical system pushed for these procedures and shamed the family for questioning them. Dr. Calley knew that the invasive procedures would generate significant revenue for the hospital and that the doctor's pay was tied to booking these procedures. When Dr. Calley confirmed with the oncologist that the recommended procedures wouldn't extend her mom's life and could cause her to die alone in a hospital, she decided to forego the diagnostic procedure. Instead, they chose to spend her mom's final days at home, surrounded by family. The procedure seemed more about satisfying the doctor's checklist and billing codes than about actually benefiting the patient, her mom. This reminds me of my grandma's story, who was sick during COVID time, got the COVID-19 virus, went into a hospital. My family couldn't even visit her. She died alone in a hospital. I can't even imagine what that was like for her. She was so about family and being with people, and her final hours were alone. It tears my heart apart. Nobody told my family, my parents, that when she went into the hospital, that could have been the case. They were just trying to do what's best for her, and they listened to the medical system, and that was the outcome. So Dr. Calley decided that rather than leaving her mom in the hospital, they took her home to Half Moon Bay. And on her mom's final day of consciousness, she expressed a desire to visit the place where she would be buried. This was like the most beautiful and also saddest part of this book right here. I highly recommend you read this part. This was insane. She expressed the desire to visit the place where she was going to be buried. And this was a beautiful forest grove overlooking the ocean, just 3 minutes from their home. And their family took her there, and she just marveled at the beauty of the ocean view and the trees. And in a touching moment, she held her husband's hand and shared silent, profound emotions of gratitude. This final embrace defined the meaning of life for Dr. Calley. Think of how amazing that end to her life was compared to what it could have been if they listened to what the doctors wanted her to do and go into the hospital with all these procedures, and just that is where she would have ended her life. Minutes after expressing how perfect and beautiful the moment was, her mom lost consciousness, and 2 days later, surrounded by her family, holding hands, she passed away. Those final 13 days were the most meaningful of Dr. Casey's life. If they had followed the medical system's advice, they would have lost those precious moments. Dr. Casey's story here it powerfully illustrates the importance of questioning medical advice and advocating for what truly matters in end-of-life care. It's a reminder to trust ourselves and to prioritize meaningful experiences over invasive procedures that might not significantly impact quality of life. The next section of this chapter, it tackles the underlying incentives in the healthcare system that prioritizes interventions over patient-centered care. The underlying incentives in the healthcare system that prioritize interventions over the patient-centered care. During her residency, Dr. Casey's close friend, a cancer surgeon, remarked, "If you walk through the doors of the surgical oncology department, you are going to get an operation, whether or not you need it." Whoa, if you walk through the doors of this surgical oncology department, you're going to get an operation, whether or not you need it. These words echoed in Dr. Casey's mind during the meeting with her mom's doctors. Her friend often saw patients being pushed into unnecessary surgeries, despite her suggestions for palliative care. Focused on comfort and peace in their final days, being routinely dismissed by senior doctors, suggesting anything other than surgery often resulted in a reprimand, and patients who declined surgery had to sign against medical advice, AMA paperwork, leaving them with fewer resources for less invasive treatments. They essentially punished you for not doing what they say. The doctor-patient relationship often involves a significant power imbalance. Patients were scared for their lives. They're not in the position to disagree with this doctor who offers what appears to be a cure for their condition. While no one gets into medicine to exploit patients, I believe that to the bottom of my soul. No one wants to get into medicine just to exploit patients. The reality of the medical profession, it can erode the initial idealism of many doctors. It almost forces them to be this way. Nearly every doctor that Dr. Casey worked with had dreamed of curing diseases and worked tirelessly to become doctors, enduring years of rigorous education and training. They started their careers with idealistic visions and motivated by the desire to make a difference in the world. However, this idealism often turned into cynicism. Many residents and successful surgeons questioned their sanity, contemplating resignation, or dreaming of completely different careers. The intense pressures and long hours really took a toll on their personal lives, leading to high rates of burnout and even suicidal depression among doctors. Doctors frequently express feeling trapped in a broken system. Financial pressures and the identity tied to having an MD after their name make changing paths unthinkable for some and for many. These dedicated professionals burdened with student loan debt are part of a system driven by one primary financial incentive. Every institution that impacts your health makes more money when you are sick and less when you're healthy. This includes hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, medical schools, and even insurance companies. We are incentivizing what we are getting. We need to incentivize what we want to see. This financial incentive creates a system that often harms patients. If an intelligent alien were to come and observe the U.S. healthcare landscape, where more than 75% of deaths and 80% of costs are driven by preventable and reversible metabolic conditions, and was given $4 trillion to fix the problem, they would never suggest waiting for everyone to get sick and then writing prescriptions and performing procedures that don't address the underlying causes to fix the problem. However, this is exactly what is happening. This is exactly what happens because it generates recurring revenue for the healthcare industry. Dr. Casey insights highlight the critical flaws in our healthcare system that prioritize profit over patient well-being. The system's incentives often lead to unnecessary interventions and overlook the root causes of these health issues. And the chapter in this book serves as a powerful reminder to question and advocate for what truly benefits your own health, your family's health, rather than just blindly following a system that profits from our illnesses. We're going to dive into an insightful part of this chapter here that underscores the systematic issues within our healthcare system and the importance of questioning medical advice, especially when it comes to our chronic conditions. Acute issues, things that happen like a broken leg or being hit by a car, like these are different, but the chronic conditions that we see. Most healthcare books recommend consulting your doctor for advice. However, Dr. Casey offers a different perspective. When it comes to preventing and managing chronic diseases, you might not want to trust the medical system right off the bat and just take their word for it. And this might sound really pessimistic or even frightening, but understanding the system's incentives and why it doesn't deserve our blind trust is the first step to becoming an empowered patient. Dr. Casey's mom received what many would consider the best top-of-the-line medical care in the world from institutions like the Mayo Clinic and the Stanford Hospital. But despite this, her health didn't improve. Her doctors, they tweaked her biomarkers with a slew of medications, but these drugs didn't heal her cells. Chronic diseases like pancreatic cancer are largely preventable with lifelong, good energy habits, the ones that are discussed in this book. Yet no one of these prestigious institutions gave her strong recommendations on improving anything when it comes to her cellular function. Instead, the only aggressive interventions that they offered were the ones when she was critically ill. You might wonder, hasn't our medical system produced miracles over the past 100 years? Hasn't life expectancy almost doubled during that time? And the answer lies in the nature of those miracles. Life expectancy has increased primarily due to sanitation practices, also infectious disease mitigation, also emergency surgery techniques. And these are all for acute conditions. And also antibiotics for life-threatening infections, for sure. These are all cures for acute issues that would kill you imminently if left unresolved. And they did back in the day. However, the medical system has used the trust earned from these acute innovations to extend its authority over into the chronic disease realm, which are more profitable due to their lifelong nature. The medicalization of chronic disease over the past 50 years has been a failure. We've siloed these diseases and developed treatments for each. Here's a ton of them. High cholesterol? See a cardiologist for a statin. Do you have high fasting blood glucose? Well, let's see an endocrinologist for metformin. ADHD? See a neurologist for Adderall. Are you depressed? Let's see a psychiatrist for an SSRI. You can't sleep? Let's see a sleep specialist for Ambien. You have pain? Let's see a pain specialist for an opioid. PCOS? Let's see an OBGYN for clomiphene. You have erectile dysfunction? We got to see a urologist for Viagra. Are you overweight? Let's see an obesity specialist for Wegovy. Do you have a sinus infection? Let's see an ENT for an antibiotic or a surgery. But no one talks about how the rates of all these conditions are increasing, even as we spend trillions. And can you fathom the number trillion? We spend trillions of dollars to treat them. We are told to trust the science, but this doesn't make sense when chronic disease rates are exploding. Our intervention-based medical system, the one that we see today, it's there by design. One of the most cited doctors in medical school is Dr. William Stewart Halsted. He's a founding physician at Johns Hopkins who created the concept of residency. To Halsted, the most important calling in a hospital was for a surgeon to cut into a patient and rid them of disease. Aggressive medical interventions were seen as heroic, even if they were painful. Halsted believed in a Darwinism system to ensure only the best and brightest became surgeons, often engaging in multi-day surgical benders with residents. During this time, John D. Rockefeller funded medical schools to teach a curriculum based on the intervention first Halsted model. The Flexner Report, created by the Rockefeller employee, outlined a vision for medical education that prioritized interventions and stigmatized nutritional and holistic remedies. Congress affirmed the Flexner Report in 1910, and it continues to define the U.S. medical system today. 1910. If that's not outdated, I don't know what is. Dr. Casey initially agreed with this mindset. She believed in solving problems by cutting them out and thought only the best should become doctors. However, she later learned that Dr. Halsted suffered from a lifelong addiction to cocaine and morphine, often experiencing psychotic breakdowns. Despite this, the intervention-based brand of medicine he championed remains unchanged. The truth is, we should trust the medical system for acute issues, like life-threatening infections or broken bones. But for chronic conditions, we should definitely take at least a few moments to question nearly every institution regarding nutrition or chronic disease advice. Simply follow the money and the incentives. This chapter highlights the critical need to question the medical system, especially when it comes to chronic diseases. Understanding the incentives behind the medical recommendations that you're getting will empower us to take control of our health and seek out what truly benefits our own well-being. The next section in this book sheds some light on the systematic issues and financial incentives that drive medical interventions, often at the cost of patient well-being. During her undergraduate years, Dr. Casey learned about the problematic incentives in the healthcare system. The dean of Stanford Medical School, Dr. Philip Pizzo, led a government-supported panel on treating chronic pain. However, 9 of the 19 people he appointed to the panel had direct ties to opioid manufacturers. 9 out of 19, direct ties to opioid manufacturers, painkillers. Dr. Pizzo also secured a $3 million donation from Pfizer, one of the largest opioid makers, leading the committee to recommend lenient opioid guidelines, contributing to today's addiction crisis. From 2012 to 2019, NIH grants went to over 8,000 researchers with significant financial conflicts of interest, many linked to pharma companies. Deans of leading institutions took millions in direct payments from pharmaceutical companies. During Dr. Casey's residency, the Affordable Care Act introduced the Merit-Based Incentive Payment System, MIPS, Merit-Based Incentive Payment System, where doctors received payments adjustments based on specific quality of care criteria. Shockingly, these metrics focused more on whether doctors prescribed drugs regularly or performed interventions rather than actual patient outcomes. So instead of incentivizing the doctors to get their patients healthier, they were graded on whether they prescribed enough drugs and their patients filled those prescriptions, or if they went through with interventions. Those were the metrics of whether they were successful or not if the patient got better. That's not right. Dr. Casey discovered that big pharma, spends 3 times more on lobbying than the oil industry, influencing healthcare legislation and guidelines. Medical doctors' pay often depends on relative value units, RVUs, measuring productivity in generating profitable billing codes. So what that means is hospitals incentivize doctors to increase their RVUs, leading them to perform more procedures and prescribe long-term medications rather than addressing root causes. It incentivizes that. In her residency, Dr. Casey was often reprimanded for suggesting dietary interventions or questioning the necessity of surgeries. Senior doctors emphasized billing and performing procedures to maximize revenues. The system rewards doctors for prescribing pills, for conducting surgeries, and for running MRIs, while multifactorial physiological outcomes that genuinely improve patients' health are not incentivized. This system leads hospitals to conduct as many procedures and quick patient visits as possible to maximize reimbursements. It just makes sense. More procedures mean more money, regardless of the patient outcome. The fervor to fight diseases like cancer often comes too late, after significant damage is already done, while preventative measures have been overlooked. Dr. Casey reflects on the motivational slogans in the hospitals that she read on the walls and the confidence patients place in their medical teams. After her mother's death, she confronted one of her mom's oncologists, expressing frustration that recommended procedures took her mom away from her family without improving her lifespan. The oncologist, deeply entrenched in the system, couldn't conceive of a different approach. This chapter highlights the critical need to question the healthcare system's financial incentives and advocate for what truly benefits your well-being, the patient's well-being. Understanding these systematic issues, it empowers us to take control of our health and seek out holistic root cause solutions, preventing what could be in the future. And the last part in this chapter, it reveals the deeply entrenched issues in our medical system, shedding light on the powerful influence of the food industry and the systematic incentives that prioritize profit over patient well-being. The biggest lie in healthcare, the most glaring and deadly example of the intervention-based incentives of our medical system, is the silence of medical leaders on the actual causes of our widespread health issues. The silence of the people that should be talking out about what's really causing these health issues. Poor food and lifestyle choices. If the Surgeon General, the Dean of Stanford Medical School, and the head of the NIH, if these individuals held a press conference urging a national effort to reduce sugar consumption among children, it's likely that sugar consumption would decrease. People in the United States generally listen to medical leaders. We saw smoking rates plummet after the Surgeon General's report on smoking, and our diet shift disastrously to more carbs and sugar after the food pyramid was released in the 1990s. However, the medical leaders remain silent on true causes of our nearly universal metabolic epidemic. 93% of people have bad metabolic health, bad energy. They don't sound the alarm about U.S. teenagers being so sedentary and consuming such poor food that 77% of 21-year-olds aren't physically fit enough to join the military. They don't call out the media companies like Viacom, which spends millions lobbying the FTC not to regulate food ads targeting kids. Fast food companies alone spend $5 billion. $5 billion was spent in 2019 on ads, 99% of which highlighted unhealthy options against USDA guidelines. 99%, all of them. Medical leaders aren't advocating for later school start times, despite scientific consensus that current early start times disrupt teenagers' normal brain development. They don't challenge the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which receives 40% of its funding from the food industry and endorses many cans of Coke as healthy. They ignore the fact that 10% of SNAP funds are spent on sugar-sweetened beverages, funneling billions of taxpayer dollars to companies like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, which Calley Means calls diabetes water. These leaders don't reject donations from the ultra-processed food companies, which have donated millions to medical groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Diabetes Association. They don't call for tighter regulation over the 80,000 synthetic chemicals in our food, water, air, soil, homes, and personal care products, many of which are hormonal and mitochondrial disruptors known to be linked to diabetes, obesity, infertility, and cancer. They aren't pushing for an end to the billions in agricultural subsidies that support the components of processed food. Remarkably, tobacco receives 4 times more government subsidies than all fruits and vegetables combined. Tobacco receives 4 times more government subsidies than all fruits and vegetables combined. Oh my, that is a problem. Obesity doctors and pediatricians aren't advocating for 0 added sugar for children, but are instead labeling obesity as a brain disease and calling for government subsidized bariatric surgeries and pharmaceutical injections to manage it. Cardiologists aren't demanding a national effort to reduce processed food to curb heart disease. The American Diabetes Association isn't declaring a war on sugar. Instead, they've accepted millions from processed food companies and endorsed products from brands like Cadbury Egg and Kool-Aid. Our medical leaders remain silent and profit as more patients get sick. In medical training, it's common to hear that patients are, quote, lazy and will inevitably make bad choices. That's why we prescribe pills. That's why we don't offer lifestyle changes. This pessimistic view overlooks the reality that patients are being overwhelmed by a system that makes unhealthy choices easy and profitable. This isn't a conspiracy, but it's a hard economic reality. Incentives. The medical and food system benefit from continued suffering, from symptoms and sickness. Most doctors don't even realize the economic and potential influences shaping their education, research, and decisions. The biggest lie in healthcare is that the reasons for our declining health are complicated. They're not. They're tied to poor energy habits. Despite respecting doctors, it's clear that many are doing the wrong things, pushing pills and interventions instead of advocating for aggressive dietary and behavioral changes. The high rates of burnout and suicide among doctors suggests a spiritual crisis about the efficacy of their work and a sense of being trapped in a dysfunctional system. This section emphasizes the need for a radical shift in how we approach health, focusing on preventative measures and lifestyle changes rather than the interventions that profit from sickness. Now, I know today's discussion was a little intense, but it's important to understand the realities that we're facing. And the good news is that we have the power to make change. Our health is in our hands, and small, consistent steps can lead to big improvements. Remember, the modern medical system may have its flaws, but we have access to incredible resources today and knowledge that can help us take control of our health. You're not alone in this journey. Together, we can support each other, we can share insights, and we can hold each other accountable. As we continue to dive deeper into good energy, we'll uncover practical strategies and actionable tips to improve our own metabolic health, our own overall well-being. So stay tuned for the next episode next week, where we will explore more ways to harness the power of good energy and live our own best lives. And that's it, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Livin the Dream Podcast. Please share the knowledge that you gain with your friends and family and hold each other accountable. If you enjoy this content, it helps a ton if you could post on your social media stories a screenshot of this episode and include one takeaway that you learned. Make sure that you tag me and share your journey. Tag me at livingthedream_podcast or at coachdamian_SD and let us know how this episode benefited you. Let us know what we missed. Let us know what we got wrong. Tell us how you think about what we covered today. We want to know. And if you could take a moment to leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to this episode on, it would help a ton. It's a nice non-cost way to support this podcast. Message us if you have any suggestions or tips that would help your Livin the Dream team that we can discuss on future episodes. I will be right here with you, working on making us stronger, happier, and healthier humans. Until next time, friends, keep living the dream.